The great chamber of the Galactic Council was a masterpiece of engineering and symbolism. A vast, silent circle of dark stone floated in the void, its outer ring a continuous window to the swirling nebula outside. In the air above the central floor, hundreds of delegates hovered at their assigned platforms, a living tapestry of the galaxy's diversity. There were the Trollocs, proud and sharp-feathered, like birds of prey, their talons clicking on polished metal. The Felorians sat in fluid-filled tanks, their jellyfish-like forms pulsing with soft light. The silicate delegate was a single, slowly revolving mound of crystalline rock. Its thoughts communicated through harmonic vibrations in the floor. The air hummed with the low buzz of translators. Today's agenda was the Orion Sprawl, a region of newly habitable worlds rich in resources and a constant source of petty disputes. The human delegation's platform was positioned, as always, between the major power blocks. It was a place of honor and burden, reflecting their self-appointed role as mediators. Ambassador Jin stood with a posture of calm readiness. He was a man who moved with considered grace, his dark eyes missing nothing. His suit was simple, a stark contrast to the radiant robes and gleaming armor of others. At his side, his aide Su Min monitored a data slate, her expression focused and neutral. She was younger, her sharp intelligence evident in her quick, assessing glances around the chamber. For 3 standard hours, the council had listened to claims and counterclaims. A aquatic species, the Nectary, argued with the geothermal miners of Drax over seismic rights. Jin had intervened twice, suggesting a provisional survey boundary that satisfied both parties. It was accepted with reluctant grumbles. This was the normal rhythm. Humanity spoke, proposed, and smoothed. Their patience was a known, almost boring, constant. Then the Trollocs' hegemony took the floor. Ambassador Kevrick spread his bronze wings in a gesture meant to convey supreme authority. The star system designated GH229 and the third world within it are a sacred ancestral nesting ground of the hegemony. His translator boomed, the voice synthetic and haughty. Our stellar charts, dated from the first expansion, prove our primacy. A hologram flickered to life above him, showing ancient-looking astral maps with Trollocs glyphs overlaid on the system in question. Su Min's fingers danced over her slate. She leaned close to Jin, her voice a whisper only he could hear through his implant. The charts are forgeries. High quality, but forgeries. The stellar drift patterns are wrong for the claimed epoch. Our deep space telescopes have the raw data. Jin gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. He had expected something like this. The Trollocs were testing boundaries, as aggressive species often did. The standard diplomatic playbook unfolded. The Felorian archivist requested time to verify the charts. The silicate delegate emitted a low chime, suggesting a joint scientific committee. The council braced for another cycle of debate, delay, and eventual brokered compromise, where humanity would find a face-saving solution for the Trollocs in exchange for their withdrawal. But Jin did not reach for his microphone to propose the committee. He did not call for a recess. He simply watched Kaverick with an expression of profound, weary disappointment. It was not anger. Anger would have been familiar. This was something colder, more final. He turned to Su Min. No words passed between them. She had been with him for 10 years. She saw the decision in his eyes. Her own eyes widened for a fraction of a second, then hardened into resolve. She gave a single, crisp nod. Jin finally activated his podium. The soft light around it glowed a steady white. The chamber quieted, expecting another measured, rational proposal from the eternal peacemakers. The Terran Accord, Jin began, his voice calm and clear, carrying to every corner through the perfect acoustics, has listened with great attention to the proceedings of this council, today and for many cycles. He paused, letting the translators catch up. We have observed a consistent and deliberate erosion of the foundational principles of mutual good faith and truthful discourse upon which this body was founded. A rustle of confusion went through the assembly. Kavrick's feathers ruffled. This was preamble, but its tone was wrong. The presentation of knowingly fabricated evidence, Jin continued, his gaze resting on the Trollocs, is not merely a dispute. It is a corruption of the process. To continue engagement under these conditions is to endorse the corruption. He took a small, black data crystal from within his jacket. It was a simple object, utterly mundane. He held it up. Our final analysis of the Trollocs' claim, and of 17 other unresolved disputes where bad faith has been employed, is contained here. But more importantly, so is a copy of the Galactic Charter. He placed the crystal on the flat surface of his podium. The click was terribly loud in the silence. Therefore, Jin said, and now his voice held the absolute, gravitational finality of a star going dark. The Terran Accord hereby withdraws from all ongoing diplomatic negotiations, effective immediately. We suspend all participation in the Galactic Council and its subsidiary committees, pending a fundamental re-evaluation of our relationship with its member states. The silence that followed was absolute and immense. It was the silence of a vacuum, sudden and shocking. For a long moment, no one moved, no one breathed. The translators seemed to have stalled. Then, Jin stepped back from the podium. Su Min was already beside him, her data slate shut down and stored. Together, without a glance back at the stunned faces of 100 species, they walked to the rear of their platform. The exit arch shimmered. Ambassador Kavrick found his voice, a sharp, outraged screech. You cannot. This is an act of aggression. You abandon your responsibilities. Jin paused at the threshold. He looked over his shoulder, not at Kavrick, but at the collective assembly. His expression was unreadable. Our only responsibility was to a process you have all chosen to make meaningless. We withdraw from the meaningless. Then they were gone. The human platform went dark, its systems powering down to a minimal dormant state. The chamber exploded. A roar of voices, clicks, shrieks, and electronic squeals filled the air. The silicate delegates' vibrations became a frantic, discordant hum. The Falorians flashed in alarmed colors. The Trollocs' ambassador was shouting, demanding the human delegation be summoned back and sanctioned. In the midst of the chaos, the small black data crystal sat untouched on the abandoned podium. When a neutral service droid finally retrieved it and its contents were displayed, the truth of Jin's words was laid bare. The analysis of the Trollocs' forgery was impeccable, irrefutable, and the Galactic Charter file was open to the very first page of the core protocols. The articles on truthful disclosure and good faith negotiation highlighted in a stark, plain font. The humans had not left in a fiery rage. They had not issued threats. They had simply presented the truth, stated a fact, and walked away. The turmoil that gripped the Galactic Council was not born from fear of their weapons, but from the terrifying, dawning realization of what their absence meant. The glue had just voluntarily dissolved itself, and the entire structure it held together began silently to tremble. The silence left by the humans did not last. It was quickly filled by a noise that was, in many ways, worse. It was the sound of bureaucratic machinery grinding to a halt. The Galactic Council chamber, once a stage for grand, if often tedious, diplomacy, became an echo chamber of frustration. For the first few cycles, the prevailing mood among the delegates was one of offended pride. The Trollocs' ambassador, Kavrick, led this charge. They throw a tantrum, he declared to anyone who would listen, his feathers puffed in aggression. They will return when they need our trade lanes. Their pride will freeze before our resolve. His supporters, mostly species who benefited from aggressive posturing, agreed loudly, But as standard days turned into a full week, the mood began to sour. The first concrete problem arose with the Nectary and the Drax. The provisional survey boundary suggested by Jin was just that, provisional. It required a final, formal treaty, a process Jin was to have chaired. Without him, the two sides met in a subcommittee room. The meeting lasted 20 minutes. The Nectary delegate accused the Drax of planning subterranean attacks. The Drax representative accused the Nectary of salinating their vent cores. They shouted over each other until the Drax, whose patience was as short as their temper was hot, melted the conference table with a geothermal heating unit and stormed out. The dispute reverted to a cold, hostile standoff, and a promising source of rare minerals went untapped. Similar scenes played out across the Council's infrastructure. A trade summit between the fiber optic life forms of KLX and the photovores of Solara collapsed because both parties had, for decades, used human merchant vessels as neutral escorts and arbiters of cargo quality. The humans had simply recalled their ships. Neither side trusted the other's transportation, and the deal, worth mega credits, fell apart. The service quarters of Council Prime, usually buzzing with aides from different species working together, grew quiet and segregated. The human diplomatic staff had been small but vital. They were the ones who remembered the Felorian need for salted water in their meeting rooms. They were the ones who could calibrate the gravity plates for the heavy silicate envoy. They were the ones who had run the neutral translation hub, ensuring no species had an algorithmic advantage. Now, simple administrative tasks became ordeals. The silicate delegate, a being known for slow, deep thought, spent days in motionless meditation. Finally, it addressed the full, restless chamber. Its voice was not a sound, but a vibration felt in the bones. We have made an error in assessment. The humans were not merely participants. They were facilitators. Their neutrality was the platform upon which our debates stood. The platform has been removed. We are now attempting to build on air. Kavrik scoffed. Neutrality is a weakness. We will adapt. We will create new committees. Who will chair them? Asked the Felorian archivist, its bioluminescence dim with stress. You, Ambassador? Would I accept your judgment on my dispute with the Drax? Would the KLX trust the Solara to mediate? The humans were acceptable to all because they desired nothing from our disputes except their resolution. Who among us can say the same? This question hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. The truth was dawning, cold and slow. The Council was not a circle of equals. It was a precarious pyramid, and humanity had been the unseen cornerstone at the bottom, bearing the weight of everyone else's rivalries. Their patient listening, their endless compromise, it had not been a sign of submission, but a monumental, voluntary effort of will. An effort they had now ceased. The final, undeniable proof came from an unexpected source, the Trellix themselves. With the humans gone, the forged stellar charts for the GH229 system became the sole focus. A coalition of smaller science-focused species, led by the precise insectoid Vix, conducted their own independent analysis. They presented it publicly, without the filter of human diplomacy. It was brutal, clinical, and utterly damning. The Vix scientists did not say the evidence is questionable. It stated, the documents are fabrications. The probability of their authenticity is zero. In the old days, Jin would have taken this report, softened its language, and used it to privately pressure Kavrik to withdraw the claim with some small concession to save face. Now there was no buffer. The accusation of bad faith was laid bare for the entire galaxy to see, with no path to dash escalation. The Trellix hegemony's credibility, a currency as valuable as warships, evaporated overnight. Trade partners grew wary. Allies questioned their intelligence. Kavrik, who had been blustering and proud, now looked isolated on his platform, his feathers lying flat against his body. The human withdrawal had not punished the Trollocs with sanctions or war. It had simply removed the veil, and the galaxy saw them for what they were. It was a more profound humiliation than any military defeat. Panic, slow and cold, began to seep through the council. If this could happen to the Trollocs, who was next? How many other disputes rested on shaky claims that only human patience had managed? The anxiety was paralyzing. Ambassadors stopped making new proposals. They became defensive, guarding their words, afraid any statement could be the one that sparked the next irreversible collapse. The great circular chamber, designed for discourse, became a monument to stalemate. The viewports showed the magnificent nebula, a reminder of the vast, shared galaxy outside. But inside, the atmosphere was one of a prison. They were all trapped together in a system that no longer functioned, staring at the dark, silent platform where the humans used to stand. The turmoil was no longer about noise and argument. It was about the deepening, silent realization of their own dependency. They had not lost a diplomat. They had lost the foundation, and no one had the first idea how to rebuild it, or if it could be rebuilt at all. The humans had not gone to war. They had simply turned out the lights and left them all fumbling in the dark. The silence from the official human diplomatic channels was total. The embassy on Council Prime remained dark, its doors responding to no codes, its communication arrays dead. The messages sent to Earth received polite, automated replies from low-level bureaucrats with no authority. The text was always the same. The Terran Accord is currently undergoing a period of strategic re-evaluation. Your communique has been logged. It was a wall of bland, impenetrable politeness. But the galaxy was vast, and humanity had not vanished. They had simply stopped talking to the Council. Across inhabited space, their ships still moved, their colonies still shone, their people still lived. It was in these places, far from the paralyzed center of power, that a new pattern began to emerge. On the edge of the Orion sprawl, the very region that had sparked the crisis, the freighter Steadfast drifted in the quiet darkness between stars. Its captain, a man named Tay, sat in his command chair, sipping bitter coffee. His ship was old but reliable, a boxy vessel designed for carrying machine parts and agricultural seeds. On his main screen, a sensor alert blinked. A small ship was approaching at high speed, its signature erratic. It was a Nectary scout vessel, its sleek hull scarred from weapon fire. Behind it, coming into sensor range, were two angular Trellix pursuit ships. Typical, muttered Tay's first mate, a woman named G. High. The big birds are bullying again. Do we call it in? Tay stared at the screen. Calling it in meant alerting the Galactic Council peacekeepers. But the peacekeepers were in chaos, their command structure tangled by the withdrawal of human liaisons and the general political freeze. A response would take hours, if it came at all. By then, the Nectary ship would be debris, not an old protocol. One written before the Council existed, flashed in Tay's memory. A protocol of the void. He made a decision. Open a channel, he said, his voice calm. Broad spectrum. To all three ships. The channel hissed open. Tay leaned forward. Unidentified vessels. This is Captain Tay of the Terran freighter Steadfast. You are approaching a zone of human commercial interest. On the scout ship, the terrified Nectary pilot heard the translation. The Trellix hunters heard it too. One of the Trellix ships answered, its captain's voice sharp with arrogance. Human vessel, this is a hegemony military operation. Stand aside. This does not concern you. Tay took another sip of his coffee. You are wrong, he said, his tone conversational. You are firing weapons in the vicinity of my ship. That makes it my concern. Break off your pursuit. The Trellix captain laughed, a harsh clicking sound. Or what? You will file a complaint. Your diplomats are gone. There is no one to complain to. That is correct, Tay agreed. There is no one to complain to. So I am not complaining. I am informing you. Break off, or I will consider you a direct threat to my vessel and my crew. The silence on the channel stretched. The Trellics were used to rules, to procedures, to threats that came through official channels. This was different. This was one man in a rusting cargo ship making a personal declaration. On whose authority? The Trellics captain snapped. My own, Tay said simply. The authority of the space around my ship. Turn. Now. He nodded to Ji-Hai. On the Steadfast's outer hull, panels slid back. No weapons emerged. Instead, powerful targeting lasers from the ship's navigation and debris avoidance array lit up, painting precise, unwavering dots on the cockpits of both Trellics fighters. They were not weapon lasers, but their message was clear. I can see you. I am not hiding Dot to the Trellics. It was an inexplicable act. It was not a show of overwhelming force. It was a show of perfect confidence. The human was not acting as a representative of a government or a council. He was acting alone, claiming a personal sovereignty over a patch of space. It was chaotic. It was unpredictable. It was terrifying in its simplicity. After a long moment, the two Trellic ships veered away, their engines flaring as they retreated at high speed. The Nectary scout, shaking, drifted closer to the Steadfast. Thank you, the Nectary pilot transmitted, its voice trembling. The Council. They did not answer. The Council isn't here, Tay replied. Are you able to make it to the neutral station in Sector 7? Yes, I think so. Then go. Safe travels. Tay closed the channel and ordered his targeting lasers retracted. He went back to his coffee. Think they'll report us? Ji-Hai asked. Probably, Tay said with a shrug. But report us to who? For what? We didn't fire a shot. We just asked them to leave. There's no rule against that. The story spread. It did not travel through official news channels, but through the whisper network of merchants, scouts, and travelers. It was shared in docking bay taverns and over long-range comms. The story of the human who stood alone and turned away Trellics hunters not with a fleet, but with a statement. On a mining colony in the Drax frontier, a human engineer named Micha was overseeing a reactor repair for her Drax employers. When a payment dispute erupted, a Drax foreman, in a fit of anger, threatened to vent the human crew section into space. Misha did not argue. She walked to the main environmental control terminal, entered a series of codes only she knew, and placed her hand on the console. If this section loses pressure, she said calmly, the reactor safeties I just installed will disengage. This entire asteroid will become a new star for about 3 seconds. The payment is in our account in 10 minutes, or we all have a very bright day. She got her payment. The Drax afterward spoke of her not with anger, but with a kind of stunned respect. It was not the human government that had backed her. It was her own skill, her own willingness to draw a line. These stories trickled back to Council Prime. The delegates heard them and were confused. This was not a coordinated military response. It was something else, a galaxy-wide display of individual agency. Every human, from a freighter captain to an engineer, was now acting as their own diplomat, their own judge, their own sovereign entity. The rigid, predictable framework of galactic diplomacy was gone, replaced by 10 billion unpredictable human variables. The silicate delegate processed this information for a full day. Finally, it vibrated a thought to the Felurian archivist. We believed their strength was in their unity. We were wrong. Their strength was in their restraint. They were a single, disciplined voice. Now that the voice is silent, we hear the individuals. And they are not asking for permission. The turmoil in the council deepened. It was no longer just about missing mediators. It was about the fear of the unknown. How do you negotiate with a government that does not speak? And more frighteningly, how do you predict the actions of a species where every single member now seems willing to act on their own? The humans had not just withdrawn from diplomacy. They had shattered the mirror in which the galaxy saw them, and 1,000 new reflections were now staring back. The main chamber of the Galactic Council remained a symbol of the crisis, but the real struggle moved to smaller, private rooms. The public sessions had become useless a theater where no one dared to speak, honestly, for fear of being the next to be exposed or abandoned. Instead, the major powers began to meet in secret dot in a secure observation blister floating away from the main station. The key figures gathered. There was Ambassador Kavrik of the Trellix, his plumage now dull and carefully groomed, the bluster gone from his eyes. The silicate delegate rested in a corner, its crystalline form absorbing the dim light. The Felorian archivist hung in a suspended tank of electrolyte fluid, its tendrils moving slowly. Representatives from the mercantile leagues of Chi LX and Solara were there, as was a stern, scaled envoy from the Drax Collective. The room was silent, the weight of the past weeks pressing down on them. The KLX representative, a being of shimmering filaments, broke the quiet. Trade volume along the corridor of light is down 60%. The human merchant guilds have suspended all contracts that involve multi-species arbitration. They will only deal in simple, direct trades. Our economy is contracting. The Drax mining operations on Nectary-adjacent asteroids are stalled. The Drax envoy growled, steam venting from a shoulder port. No human insurers will underwrite the ventures. They call the risk unquantifiable. All eyes, in their various ways, turned Kavrik. The Trellix shifted uncomfortably. The hegemony's position has been made difficult by the human action. But our military strength is undiminished. Perhaps it is time to consider that the humans have revealed a fundamental weakness in the galactic order. We should not beg them to return. We should compel them. The silicate delegate emitted a low, grinding vibration that the translators rendered as a sigh. Compel them with what, Ambassador? They have withdrawn behind their borders. To compel them is to invade. Have you analyzed a human war fleet? Has anyone? The question hung in the air. The truth was, no one had. Human military assets were rarely seen. They provided security for their own convoys, but their ships were designed for defense, not conquest. Their soldiers, when seen, were quiet professionals who never participated in the Council's joint military exercises. The galaxy knew the humans as traders, farmers, engineers, and diplomats. The idea of their warriors was an abstract, shadowy thing. Their technology is integrated, the Felorian archivist bubbled softly. Our scientists have long noted it. Their tools are not specialized. A human communication device can become a navigation computer. A farming drone can be repurposed for reconnaissance. This points to a terrifying flexibility. What looks like a freighter might be something else entirely. Captain Tay demonstrated this. Kavrik clicked his beak. A bluff. A freighter with targeting lasers. And if it was not a bluff? The silicate delegate asked. What if, behind those closed doors, they have spent centuries designing a society where every tool has a peaceful purpose and a wartime function? We based our assessment of their strength on what they showed us, patience and reason. What if that patience was not a limit, but a strategy? What if their reason was a choice, not a necessity? A cold fear, deeper than any before, seeped into the room. They had all in their way looked down on the humans. They were the helpful ones, the ones who did not boast, who settled for compromise. Now, that image was crumbling, and what might be beneath It was a vast, unknown depth. The archivist has recovered an old data fragment, the silicate delegate continued, from the early days of human deep space transmission. A political slogan, we believe. A screen illuminated, showing strange angular human text, followed by the translation. Speak softly and carry a big stick. The aliens stared at it. They have been speaking softly for centuries. The Drax envoy rumbled, translating the metaphor into something he understood, very softly. So where is this big stick? Have we been ignoring it? Or, the Felorian whispered, its light flickering, have we never been important enough for them to show it to us? Perhaps their stick was never a weapon to be used against us in war. Perhaps it was the very thing they have now done. Withdrawal, silence, the removal of their presence, which we now see was holding everything together. That is their big stick, and they have laid it down in front of us, gently, to show us its weight. The realization was a shock. The human strategy was not one of escalation, but of subtraction. They hadn't mobilized fleets. They had recalled their mediators. They hadn't issued threats. They had revoked their goodwill. Their power was not in what they could do to others, but in what they could choose to stop doing for them. Kavrik looked deflated, his strategic mind racing down this new, alarming path. If the human stick was their indispensable role in the galactic system, then any attempt to attack them would only prove their point about the Council's barbarity, and would likely cause the complete and permanent collapse of everything the hegemony's economy relied on. You could not bomb a foundation without the whole tower falling on you. The solution is clear, then, the KLX representative said, its filaments trembling with frustration. We must get them to return. We must restore the system. How? Ask the Solara envoy, its body glowing with anxious heat. They do not answer our calls. They have made their judgment of us. The silicate delegate was silent for a long time, its internal crystals refracting the light. Finally, it spoke. We must accept their judgment. We must meet their condition, though they never formally stated it. Which is? Kavrik asked, though he dreaded the answer. The condition they demonstrated by leaving, the archivist said, its voice filled with a sad certainty. An end to bad faith. An end to lies and manipulation within this chamber. We must prove we can function with truth, even if it is painful. We must start by cleaning our own house. All eyes went to the Trellix ambassador. The meaning was unmistakable. The crisis had begun with his forgery. The path forward, if there was one, had to begin with its unequivocal correction. No face-saving compromise. No negotiated half-truth. The very thing the old human diplomacy would have provided was the thing that had to be sacrificed. Kavrik felt the pressure of the galaxy upon him, not as a military threat, but as a sheer, desperate need for the return of stability. The human silence had become a force, bending them all toward a painful honesty they had spent eons avoiding. The turmoil was no longer about the human's absence. It was about the mirror that absence held up, and the ugly reflection they were all forced to see. 6 standard months after they had walked out, they returned. There was no fanfare, no announcement. The main concourse of Council Prime was busy with the usual flow of alien aides and functionaries, when the sight of them caused the entire wide corridor to fall still. Ambassador Jin and Aide Sunmin walked side by side, their steps measured and calm, just as they had been on the day they left. They wore the same simple suits. Their expressions were the same, attentive, neutral, unreadable. Word spread through the station like an electric current. By the time Jin and Su-min reached the great doors of the council chamber, every delegate platform was occupied. The murmuring died to an absolute hush as the doors slid open. 1,000 eyes watched as the 2 humans crossed the central floor. The light above their platform glowed to life as they mounted it. The sound of their footsteps was the only sound in the universe. Jin did not look around at the gathered assembly. He placed his hands on the podium and waited a moment, as if collecting his thoughts. The silence stretched, heavy with anticipation, fear, and fragile hope. He activated his microphone. "The Terran Accord," he began, his voice unchanged as if no time had passed, "has completed its re-evaluation. We will resume a limited diplomatic presence." A wave of relief, so potent it was almost a sound, swept through the chamber. But Jin continued, and his next words froze that relief in place. "This presence will operate under a new paradigm. The previous system is broken. We will not participate in its fiction." He looked up, his gaze sweeping the circle. "From this moment, diplomacy will be based on verifiable action, not negotiated words. All claims submitted to this council for arbitration must be backed by open-source data, available for audit by any member species. Arbitration rulings, once made, will be binding. There will be no more cycles, no more endless revisitation of settled matters in bad faith. The purpose of this body will be resolution, not debate." He paused, letting the stark simplicity of the terms settle. They were not a proposal. They were a statement of fact. This was the price of their return. "The first test of this new paradigm," Jin said, "is the matter of the GH229 system, claimed by the Trellix hegemony." All attention snapped to Ambassador Kavrik. The Trellix looked diminished, his proud posture gone. The months had not been kind. His forgeries had been exposed, his credibility shattered, his economy straining as former partners kept their distance. The silent pressure from the other powers in their private meetings had been immense. The humans had not been there to enforce anything, but their absence had enforced everything. Kavrik stood. He did not spread his wings. He held a data chip in a trembling talon. "The Trellix hegemony," he said, the words seeming to physically pain him, "withdraws its claim to the GH229 system. We acknowledge the stellar charts presented were in error. We cede all navigational and colonial rights to the Terran Accord as the administering species of the colony world." It was a complete, unconditional surrender. It was more than anyone had expected. In the old days, the humans would have given him a small, barren moon to save face. Now there was nothing. Just the brutal, clean excision of the Lie.Jin gave a single, slow nod. "The Terran Accord acknowledges the withdrawal. The claim is void. The colony's status is confirmed." He did not thank Kavrik. He did not offer consolation. He simply recorded the fact. The lesson was clear for everyone to see. Under the new rules, defeat for falsehood would be total and public. Victory for truth would be quiet and absolute. The cost of cheating had just been calculated, and the number was devastating. "The second matter," Jin continued, as if moving down a list, "is the Nectary-Drax seismic boundary dispute. The provisional map established 6 months ago is now permanent. It is ratified as binding. Are there objections?" The Nectary delegate and the Drax envoy looked at each other across the chamber. For months, they had been locked in a costly silent standoff. The path of least resistance, the only path back to profitable operation, was suddenly clear. "The Nectary Concord accepts," the watery voice chimed. "The Drax Collective accepts," the envoy growled. Smoke curling from its nostrils. Jin nodded again. "Logged and ratified. We will dispatch neutral human engineers to survey the final marker points." And like that, with 2 minutes of conversation, a dispute that had festered for years and then frozen for months was over. The efficiency was breathtaking and terrifying. This was not diplomacy as the art of the possible. This was diplomacy as the application of surgical truth. As the session moved to adjourn, a young delegate from a small system, emboldened by the shocking change, floated their platform forward. "Ambassador Jin, Their translated voice echoed slightly. May we ask? Why did you come back? What changed? Jin finally showed a hint of something other than neutrality. It was not a smile. It was a look of profound understanding. He looked at the young delegate, then at the vast assembly. We never left the galaxy, he said, his voice softer now, but no less clear. We only left this room. We needed you all to understand what our silence meant. You had to experience the absence to understand the value of the presence. He paused, choosing his words with care. You have now felt the weight of the stick. So now we can speak softly again. He gave a final small nod to Su Min, and they stepped away from the podium. The session was adjourned, but the chamber did not erupt in chaos. A strange, thoughtful quiet persisted as delegates began to drift away. The rules had changed. The game was different. There was no more room for the old manipulations, the clever deceptions. The humans had not returned as friendly mediators. They had returned as architects of a starker, harder, but ultimately more solid reality. On the human platform, Su Min powered down the systems. She allowed herself a small, private glance at Jin. Do you think it will hold? She asked quietly, in their own language. Jin watched the last of the delegates depart. He saw the Trellix ambassador walking alone, head bowed. He saw the Drax and Nectariades actually speaking to each other by the door, arranging a time for the survey. For a while, Jin said. Long enough for the lesson to sink in. They will test the new boundaries, of course. But they now know the consequence. We will not argue. We will simply leave. And they have all remembered how cold it gets when we do. Together, they left the chamber. The light on their platform remained on, a steady, unwavering white. It was no longer a symbol of gentle patience. It was a beacon, illuminating a new, harder path forward, a path the humans had forced the galaxy to walk by showing them what lay in the darkness when they chose to turn out the light. The turmoil was over. In its place was a clear, simple, and unchallengeable understanding.